So my first question for you is, how did you become the CYFD Cabinet Secretary?
So I was appointed by Governor Martinez in her second term to serve as the Cabinet Secretary for CYFD.
And prior to serving as secretary, did you work with children? Was that sort of something you did?
So I was a mom, worked with children in ways like that, had volunteered, spent a lot of time with children, but my background was not in child welfare. So I was a bit of a different choice for that role. And why I was put into that job and why I felt I could do that job was my background was really in management and leadership. And I had led large organizations. I had led the tourism department prior to being at CYFD. And before that, I was at PepsiCo for 11 years, where I was a general manager of a $1.8 billion business. And in those roles, what I learned was how to bring together large groups of people and get them focused on achieving goals. And in this case, again, the goal was how we could improve the quality of life for our children.
How long did you serve as Cabinet Secretary?
I was there for 4 years, so 4 full years.
And what was your time like serving as the secretary?
It's the most brutal and incredible job I've ever had. I say it is the best, worst job. I absolutely loved it, and I was completely destroyed by it, to be quite honest, emotionally. My very best moments of work happened in that job, and of course, my very worst moments of work happened in that job.
What were some of your frustrations while with CYFD? We'll start with frustrations.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly complex system, and everybody wants simple solutions. And as the cabinet secretary, your goal is to take care of these children, and anything less than that is unacceptable. And I understand that. I set myself to that same goal, but there are so many factors that are out of your control that you simply can't be perfect in that job. And not being able to do that, it's heartbreaking. So it's an incredible job, but it's an incredibly complex job because the stakes are so high, and what you're working on is so important. I truly can't think of anything more important than what you're working on in that job, but it's frustrating because, again, so many factors out of your control. Every aspect of it is dealing with humans, and you simply can't control humans. You can't control human behavior, so you have to continue to take steps to improve things and get them better. But anything short of perfection is failure in a job like that, and that's incredibly frustrating and hard.
Absolutely. Now, you said some of your best moments of work came with CYFD. What were some of those moments that stuck out to you?
Oh, anytime I got to interact with the children, whether it was our older children that were in foster care, our children that were incarcerated, and spending time with them, hearing about their lives, or children that were just brought into care. I made a point of spending time out in the field, and I'll never forget days when I met with some kids that I know maybe others saw from the news, but I got to actually spend time with them, sit with them, play with them. Some of them I even would go to court with to be there for them, and to get to do that for kids that don't have necessarily a lot of stability or smiles in their lives, and just to offer that was incredible. Truly, I mean, thinking of it now, it was the best, the absolute best that I think anyone could get from an occupation, much less from life, is to get to spend time with these kids.
Sure. Something that came up in multiple interviews with several different people is, we don't often hear about the good things that happen within CYFD. What are some of the good things that happen that we don't hear about?
So first of all, we have some incredible foster parents. And these are people that are willing to do the hardest work. They're taking children in the middle of the night. They're working with kids who have experienced significant trauma. It's not easy. And they're doing that, and they're doing that knowing that at the end of the day, these children may go back to their parents. So they are just filling these children with love from such a selfless place. It's truly beautiful to see. We also work with families on reunification. And when that can happen successfully, it's beautiful. When a child can go back to a parent and that parent has done the work to be in a place where they can provide for that child, it's incredibly, incredibly beautiful. I think that the resiliency of the children that we work with, that we interact with, that we care for in CYFD CYFD will both destroy kind of your belief in humanity, and then it will rebuild it right back up when you see these kids and you see what they are able to get through, to accomplish, and then to become. I worked with a lot of former foster kids, and just thinking of some of them right now and what they are doing to change this world and make it better for kids that are going through what they went through, it's remarkable. It's incredible, and it again will fill every part of your soul.
Does any child in particular stick out to you?
Oh, absolutely. There's a young man by the name of Andrew, and I met him very early on. Again, when I was put in this job, it was controversial. There was a lot of discussion about it, and what was incredible were the most supportive folks were our foster children and our former foster youth. And they said, look, we don't care what people are saying about you. We're going to give you a shot. And we're not going to judge you by your past. We're going to judge you by who you are. And from the beginning, that's what he did. And for 4 years, he would come by, he would work to support legislation that was important to us. And just an incredible young man who went through things that were unimaginable in his life and came out of it so strong and with such a desire to serve others.
During your time, what do you believe you were able to accomplish with the agency?
So we were really focused. We built a strategic plan, and then we measured our results against that strategic plan. And we were able to move the needle on the majority of kind of the important measures that we were looking at. So we were able to decrease vacancy rate with our workers, which becomes absolutely critical when you're talking about getting workers to do the job that they're there to do and to be able to do it well. We increased training. We changed our process for hiring so that we could bring people in more quickly and really focused on recruiting folks from our colleges around New Mexico. So really, one was all about our people. It was about hiring people, getting them properly trained, and then focusing on the culture. And what was most important to me was developing a culture of accountability and support. I say always those two words, but always together. Because what I had seen in the past is sometimes the pendulum would swing, and if you focus only on accountability without support, you end up in a state of fear and nothing gets accomplished. However, if you also focus on support with no accountability, you end up with complacency. And again, nothing gets accomplished. So we really focused on my time there on building a culture that properly balanced accountability and support. We started an at-risk child care program and increased participation in child care. When I was at CYFD, early childhood services were a part of CYFD. And it was really important to me, and my focus, having early childhood services under CYFD, was how we could make sure it was serving our most at-risk families. You will see in nearly every horrific case of child abuse, you find an inappropriate caretaker. Oftentimes, sometimes it's not even at the hands of mom or dad, but it's someone who that child is left with that they shouldn't be. So we wanted to remove barriers and help facilitate getting folks who were in a bit of a tough situation connected to childcare, so no mom felt she needed to leave her child with an inappropriate caretaker. So we really focused on increasing those numbers. We also started a child wellness center, which was really important, which was saying when kids come into custody, how can we make it a better situation for them? Every second, I went out in the field and remember bringing kids into custody, and what I would see is kids were going right back to the office, sitting in offices. And I think this is the worst day of your life, and you have to go sit in an office. That's not right. So while we had to focus and wanted to focus on prevention, we also wanted to focus on just the quality of life for children when they came into our custody. So we built a children's wellness center so they had a place where they could go decompress as they were waiting to get placed with that foster family. And so again, looking for little things that we could do to take this horrific day and make it slightly better for these children mattered.
So explain the Children's Code and how it affects CYFD.
the Children's Code, CYFD is governed by the Children's Code. So it affects every aspect of how things are done at CYFD. And the Children's Code is put in place, again, to make sure that we are looking beyond just criminal, like the criminal code and how that would impact children. We're looking at other aspects of these children's lives and what the state needs to be doing to keep them safe.
What was your philosophy when you served as secretary?
So one of the first things we did is we laid out our mission, and our mission was improve the quality of life for our children, period. And it stopped right there. And folks were upset and angry that we didn't include more stakeholders in that mission. We didn't include, aunts, uncles, parents, families. We stopped with children because my philosophy, my belief was the reason this agency exists is to protect and take care of those who cannot do it for themselves. And to make sure that of all the folks, all of the stakeholders that are involved in these complex ecosystems, which they are, I never wanted to lose sight of who we were there to fight for and to care for, and that was those children. Families are absolutely critical and essential in terms of being able to do that, but my thought, my belief, my philosophy was that should always be in service of the child. That is why this agency exists. There are many other agencies with many wonderful programs that are focused on helping us as, helping others. But this particular agency and what our focus, I believe, needed to be is on those children.
When you look at the Children's Code, do you believe that children come first before family, or do you think it's the other way around?
I think it could be up to interpretation and that you have to look at it. But again, if you're and it's complex, and to ignore the complexity would be naive and would actually lead to nothing good because it is complex. So you have to look at that, to look at the nuance of balancing those two things. But again, from my perspective, the reason that it exists, and when you look at who doesn't have another avenue for that support, it's these children. When you look at where the ultimate vulnerability is, it's with these children. And so that's why, again, when looking at balancing the complexity, the message that I had and had for the team is when we have to balance things, we go back to the child. When we have to make decisions, the question we ask ourselves is what is in the best interest of this child? And just to continue to anchor on that question, what is in the best interest of this child? And how do all these other really important stakeholders play a role serving that child? But yeah, I believe that CYFD does and should exist to serve those children.
Can you explain how the system works when a child is taken into custody?
So yeah, if we step back, one, which is that a call will come in either to law enforcement or to CYFD, really important that you guys make everyone aware that it is essential that they call if there is an issue or a concern. So a call will come in and an investigation will start. If the call rises to the level of potential criminal involvement or something that's frightening, it should be CYFD and law enforcement both responding. They'll both go and respond and determine if that child, one, has been the victim of abuse or neglect, and two, if they are safe or need to be removed from the home. And so if the determination by law enforcement is made that they need to be removed from home, then there's put on what's called a 48-hour hold, where for 48 hours they are in custody while CYFD builds a case to go before a judge to determine that this child needs to stay in custody. In order for that to happen, there's really two major things that CYFD has to show. They have to show that that child is in imminent harm, and they have to show that they made reasonable efforts not to remove the child. So back to your question about which way the Children's Code goes, again, kind of somewhat up to interpretation, but clearly there is a focus on not just taking children away from families, as there should be in the majority of cases. But if that child is in danger, then that child should be able to be removed from that dangerous situation. So at that point, a judge will have to determine if CYFD has made that case properly, that this child was in imminent harm, that reasonable efforts were made not to keep that child in that position. Then the child will come into custody, and then you start a long process that can end basically, at the end of this process, it can end in reunification or it can end in the termination of parental rights.
Why do you think CYFD has struggled for so many years?
I think there's many reasons. One, as we've talked about, it's an incredibly complex system. Two, it is a state agency that has the struggles of many other state agencies. You have change in leadership every 4 or 8 years, which makes it hard to have a consistent strategy and plan that gets executed. And again, with something this complex, it takes time to make those types of changes. Too, everyone who goes into this work, I believe, does it for either all the right reasons or all the wrong reasons. And it takes a lot of work to continually be assessing why the people that are working there are working there. Again, some of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life work at CYFD, just people that have made it their life's mission. They don't care, they're not worried about money, they're not worried about fame, they're not worried about any of that, but they want to focus on these kids, and they're incredible. But you also will have people that go to work at this agency for the wrong reasons. You're dealing with vulnerable populations, so you constantly have to be working on elevating the workforce and making sure that you're able to elevate and celebrate those workers that are there for the right reasons and hold accountable those who are not. And it is difficult to hold people accountable in state government. So it's another reason it's incredibly complex. Another is that it's not just about CYFD. It's a whole system. And I think when bad things happen, eyes go right to CYFD. Rightly so. CYFD must be held accountable, but they are not the only part of this system. They are dealing with laws. They're dealing with other stakeholders that may feel strongly in different ways. So there's a lot that's being balanced in every case. And then finally, it's difficult because it's humans. We're talking about human beings, and human beings are not all good and they're not all bad. And you have an agency that has to be constantly navigating the complexity of human beings and making decisions where the wrong decisions, the stakes are so very high. Both ways. If you take a child away from their family and it would have been better for them to stay in that family, all the research will show you that child would have been better to have been left with their family. If, however, you do not take a child and an atrocity occurs, it's the worst pain that one can imagine being on the side of on any side of that. I mean, dealing with that, being in that is incredibly difficult and heartbreaking, knowing that every single decision that is made, the stakes are just so very high. But you can't just say, well, if the stakes are high, then just take all the kids into custody, because that too does not work. It doesn't work in terms of a whole system. And the fundamental belief of pretty much everyone, if you dig down into it, that parents have a right to parent. It gets really complex. I would say parents have a right to parent until that child's safety is in jeopardy. Finding that exact line is tricky.
I mean, it seems like being in the position that you were in, you'd have to have tough skin, knowing that one way or another, you have to make the right decision. Do you think about those decisions sometimes that maybe didn't go the right way still?
Absolutely, and again, it's not usually one person or one decision. There's a lot of laws that dictate how these things happen. So what I think about the children all of the time still, years later, think about the children that I interacted with, children that I think of all of the children that I had the pleasure of interacting with, and then the heartbreak of the aftermath of. And I think about what we were really focused on when I was at CYFD is when tragedy occurred, the bottom line was something didn't go right. And that it could be that we did everything just as we were supposed to, but if a child ended up dead or hurt or consistently abused, any of those horrific things, then something needed to change. So what we always looked at is what needs to change. Was it a matter of the wrong decision being made, or was it a matter of the right supports not being in place? Was it that people weren't held accountable earlier when they should have? So we went through in detail those situations to figure out, one, did something go wrong? Was something done wrong? And does someone need to be held accountable? The answer to that was no. Then the question was, then how did this still happen? And what policies, procedures, laws need to change so this doesn't happen in the future? So it was always, every time a tragedy occurred, we went back together and looked at it, got a team together to look at it and answer those questions so that we were constantly in a state of improvement. As I mentioned earlier, it's hard because anything less than perfection in this role is unacceptable. It's an impossible place to be, but what you can do is continually work to get better, work to move things forward, and work to, through consistency, through policy, changes, work to make it so that you're addressing some of the factors that contributed to tragedy.
Monique, it sounds like when you were at the agency, you sort of had this checklist when something would go wrong. I don't know if you can recall, but was there anything when you would go through that checklist that seemed to be a reoccurring theme, something that would always come up?
There wasn't. If there was, it would be easy. If there was one thing that we could look at and say this is always what the issue is, it would be easy, but there wasn't. I will say, two of the biggest things that we saw were drug use. Drug use is incredibly difficult for an agency like CYFD. I will give you an example of that complexity. We had removed a child from their parents and went before a judge to prove that there was imminent harm and that we had made reasonable efforts. And what the judge said was, you don't need to prove that the father is a heroin user. You have to prove that the fact the father is a heroin user puts the child in imminent harm, because we have a lot of functioning drug users in New Mexico. So when you're up against that, and with drugs, what you see is that you don't know what's going to happen next. So you're in this position where you have to know what's going to happen next in situations where you don't know what's going to happen next. It's incredibly difficult. But two of the things that often, almost always came up were drug use, meth or heroin, and inappropriate caretakers. So those were, when we looked at are there any themes, are there any trends, the most horrific abuse cases almost always included drug use and inappropriate caretakers.
Were there times where you felt that CYFD had failed to protect a child?
Anytime there was a tragedy, I and we as an agency had to look at what happened. And again, we would go back and look at, one, did we do what we were supposed to do? Did we act as we were supposed to act? Whoever it was, all the people along the way. We would do a complete incident review to determine if the proper steps were taken. If tragedy occurred, then even if the proper steps were taken, there's something that needed to change. There was something that we needed to learn from that situation to do different moving forward. And we had instances while I was the cabinet secretary, where we determined that every person had not acted appropriately throughout the process, that our agency hadn't responded as we were supposed to and should have. And in those instances, we held workers accountable. And that was hard. That hadn't been done before, to my knowledge, and it sent shockwaves through the agency. But some of my very best workers came and said, yeah, this is needed. You have to hold people accountable. So when there were situations where it was determined we had not done what was needed to be done, then people were held accountable. In situations where we went through and everyone who worked on this case or with this case had done what they were supposed to do and operated with the best knowledge they could, and tragedy still occurred, then in those situations, something still failed this child. And it was up to us to figure out what that was and what we needed to change moving forward. So we looked at where policies needed to change, processes needed to change, laws needed to change. And so regardless, if something happened to a child, and I told you that was our job, is to protect those children, then in those instances, absolutely the overall system failed that child, and we needed to go back and determine if it was a situation where accountability needed to come into play or where we needed to change our approach.
So Monique, when you left the agency, did you feel there was anything more needed to fix problems?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's probably the greatest pain was having to leave the agency when I believed we were starting to make progress, but knowing how long it would take with consistent leadership and focus to move this massive system. So absolutely, when I left, it wasn't at all like boxes had been checked. It was like we have the right plan in place to build from, and we had started to really do a lot of what I talked about in terms of building a culture that balanced accountability and support. But cultures take a long time to build, to change, and then to really cultivate and become how things were operating. So my hope when I left, what I spent my last few months doing was going to every office around the state and spending time with the workers and reminding them that regardless of who their leader was, they were in a position to make a difference by continuing to focus on balancing accountability and support, holding themselves accountable, holding their coworkers, their teammates accountable, offering them support, and then doing the same with the families that they worked with, whether it was foster families, making sure they were getting the support they need, bio families, and making sure they were being held accountable and getting the support that they needed to turn their lives around. So that was really the focus, was on getting what we had done solidified within the agency and the 30 plus offices around the state.
What is it like now looking at all of the news coverage with the issues when it comes to CYFD?
It's heartbreaking. First and foremost, I'm a mom, and I love kids. I love the children that I had the ability to interact with. So it's heartbreaking. Every story I see, it's infuriating. It's frustrating. Like everyone else, I want change. I don't want to continue to see these stories. It's difficult because I don't know what's happening or not happening at the agency. I don't know if they're continuing to do those reviews. I hope they are. And again, I think of the incredible workers I worked with that I know are there, and they're feeling this, and they're feeling it firsthand. I think of them. So it's heartbreaking and infuriating.
Do you feel that over the years the agency has operated in secrecy?
I think that's a great question. The Children's Code has confidentiality clauses built into it, and they're for a really good reason, which is that you don't want children to be victimized twice. You don't want them to go through these horrible, traumatic experiences and then to have to relive it when they go to school the next day, and knowing that their friends and neighbors and whatnot know of that. So I really understand why confidentiality is important. However, I think it can be taken too far. And I believe that CYFD is a state agency, and we serve the public, and the public has to understand how this system works, or we won't be able to improve it. And when I was at CYFD, transparency was something that we really focused on. And we thought, if we're going to be talking about what's going on and engaging the community in our efforts, then they have to understand more about what happens at this agency. So I think there is confidentiality, and it's there for a good reason, but I think it can certainly be taken too far, and it can come at the cost of accountability. And so once again, you're in a place where you have to find the proper balance.
How does turnover at the secretary level affect the agency?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging for an agency to deal with turnover at the secretary level. When you're talking about a system as complex as this, you have to have a strategic plan. You have to have focus. It's so easy to chase after all these cool, exciting, interesting new things that might come out in child welfare, but you have to work on solidifying the core of what that agency does, and that takes time, it takes focus, and it takes consistency. And when you have turnover at leadership level, it disrupts that, and it disrupts the progress that is and can be made. Again, while I was there, things were absolutely not perfect, but we were making progress, and we were making progress in multiple areas. Many of the critical factors that we look at for success, we were making progress. Not fast enough, but we were making progress. And so to walk away after 4 years was incredibly difficult. And my biggest, hope and wish is that the team would keep that moving in the direction that it was moving. But that type of disruption, it is hard for an agency. And you're talking about a really large state agency, thousands and thousands of workers all around the state. So to get them all operating with the same philosophy following the same procedures. It takes time, and I think that disruption can be challenging. I also think, I think when it comes to CYFD, there's really, I don't see there to be a political element to it. It doesn't feel like it should be an agency that is political or should change drastically depending on who is in office. If you can align kind of on the goal of protecting those kids, then it does seem like there can be consistency and focus moving forward.
How do you feel when you hear about a child death?
I mean, I'm sure I feel like all of your viewers feel. I feel absolutely gutted. I feel heartbroken. I feel like it's so unfair. These children, they didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to be put in the position they're in. There's so little that they could have done to affect what is happening to them, and that's heartbreaking for me. It's terrible to imagine what they have gone through. I think about their death, and then I think about what their life was like before they died, and that's equally, if not more, heartbreaking. As I've mentioned, I have kids, and I am around children and see they're just what incredible beings they are. And to think about what some of them go through, the lack of stability, the trauma, it's devastating.
What do you feel are some solutions we need?
So first, I think you need, as I've mentioned, you need a strategic plan, you need focus, and you need consistency. Second, you have to focus on the workers, the thousands of CYFD workers around the state. You have to make sure there are enough workers, that they are properly trained, that they are continually trained, and that you are cultivating a culture that balances accountability and support. Those two words always, and those two words together. It does not work if you do all one or all the other. Second, you have to reach out, reconnect, make sure that you're looking closely at what's happening with the Early Childhood Development Department. You have to connect at-risk families to the services they need. And it's not easy. It's not as simple as having the services. A lot of work and effort needs to go into getting these families actually connected to those services. When they drop out, getting them brought back in, especially child care assistance, making sure that there's a robust at-risk child care assistance program. So not just that child care assistance exists for everybody, but that our at-risk families are really getting that service, taking advantage of it, so no mom feels she needs to leave her child with an inappropriate caretaker. Third, you have to get the community involved. As I would go out and speak and tell everybody, look, no one agency, no one governor, no one legislator, no one branch of government can change this on their own. It takes the whole community coming together for our children. It takes people calling and reporting abuse and neglect. It takes people stepping up and helping their neighbors and families when they find themselves in a situation where they can't provide for their children as they should. It takes the lawyers. It takes fighting on both sides, a hardy judicial system. It takes our legislators continuing to look at the laws that are in place and improving them. Like, the community has to be engaged in this. It can't just be on CYFD. It has to be the full community coming together. And then finally, again, for CYFD, I really think it is about remembering why that agency exists and who it serves, and that is our children. That is the children of New Mexico, the children who need a voice. They need people fighting for them. They need advocates. They are the most vulnerable when we look at this complex system. They are the most vulnerable and need the most support.
So we all play a role in protecting New Mexico's children.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And it will not get better until everyone takes that role seriously and doesn't just look at pointing fingers, but really looks at getting involved and making a difference where they can with the children that they can. Often the question was asked of me is, shouldn't we just make it easier for CYFD to bring kids into custody? And that's incredibly challenging, because one of the biggest issues that we face is people using CYFD as a weapon in custody battles. So for all of the calls that we get that are real cases that absolutely need to be followed up on and where kids are in trouble. We also have a lot of times when people think that they're going to use CYFD to make their ex look bad. And it's terrible because it takes time, energy, resources away from the cases where folks should be focused on, and points it towards cases where really what you have is just a battle between parents, and you don't actually have harm being inflicted on the kid. Well, you do have harm being inflicted on the child, but because of the parents fighting with one another. So if you make it too easy for CYFD or law enforcement to take kids into custody, then the fear is that becomes a bigger issue. Then in those cases, the weaponization of CYFD can become a bigger issue. Another challenge with regards to CYFD is so much of what we do is by law voluntary. So we are in a position where, again, in an effort to protect human rights and not having the state get into your business without going through all of the right processes, a lot of times when CYFD has interaction with families, the ongoing follow-up is voluntary. Participation in the actual investigation is voluntary. So there's a lot of areas where CYFD is working to influence how a family is acting without having the law necessarily behind it or any sort of teeth around those interactions and what CYFD is asking of these families. There's a lot of research that people would continually bring to me that said and stated and proved that children do better when left in their homes, when left with their families. And again, years and years of research that shows that overall children will do better when left with their family. But what never felt right about that to me was the cases that we saw where they did not fare better being left in their family, where when they ended up dead or they ended up experiencing abuse that's beyond what any human should ever even hear about, much less actually go through. So that's what's so challenging about this is if things are not great, yes, the child will be better left with that family, but there's a point at which that is absolutely not the case. And what that child experiences, they're better to have the disruption of not being kept in that family unit.